Close your eyes and drift back through centuries, to a city where the past and present are never far apart. Istanbul, crossroads of worlds, draped in the gold of sunrise and the call of distant muezzins. Here, stone palaces and wooden shacks huddle side by side. Great ships glide silently along the Bosphorus, and the air, whether in the alleyways of fishermen or the shadowed courts of sultans, always carries the faintest promise of something unexpected. It is the early 1700s. The Ottoman Empire, once fierce with ambition, now enjoys a rare season of peace. The swords that built an empire hang quietly in their scabbards. Instead, the city's passions have found a new object, a flower no larger than your palm, with petals like painted silk and a story deeper than anyone first imagined. The tulip. You might think of tulips as simple decoration, garden color, nothing more. But in this city and throughout the Ottoman world, the tulip was never just a flower. It was a symbol, a currency, a puzzle, a promise. It was a cause for celebration, a reason for intrigue, sometimes even a spark for scandal or revolt. In the shadow of mosque domes and palace gates, the tulip's journey would mirror that of the empire itself. Beautiful, unpredictable, and at times, dangerously fragile. This is not the kind of history you find in dusty chronicles or military campaigns. This is the secret, subtle story, one woven not from battles but from quiet obsessions in everyday lives. It is a story built from soil and sweat, from ink-stained ledgers and whispered secrets, from festivals that lit the night and silent, gardens that remembered the dreams of 100 forgotten hands. In these hours together, you'll wander through 20 stories, some as grand as sultans' feasts, others as humble as a flower pot in a shoemaker's window. You'll walk the corridors of Topkapi Palace, listening for the coded messages of rival viziers and watchful gardeners. You'll squeeze through Istanbul's tangled bazaars, feeling the weight of bureaucracy and risk that clings to every bulb. You'll step behind the curtain of public celebration and discover the invisible hands. Gardeners, servants, traders, soldiers, whose quiet labor shaped the fate of an empire. We'll follow the tulip as it slips out of royal gardens and takes root among ordinary people, in merchant courtyards in the hands of hopeful children, in the back lanes where neighbors compete not just for profit, but for pride and belonging. We'll hear how the flower found unlikely champions among soldiers and how its meaning shifted with each season. Sometimes a sign of unity, sometimes a mark of rivalry, always a mirror to the world that cherished it. This is a history of small things, petals pressed between prayer book pages, coded bouquets passed in the harem, secret ledgers tracking fortunes made and lost on a single bloom. You'll witness how beauty became a kind of power, and how even the smallest acts, digging, planting, waiting, echoed through palaces and shacks alike. And you'll see, again and again, how the most ordinary people could leave a mark more lasting than any monument. You are not an outsider here. Each story will speak to you directly, guiding you gently through the dust and wonder of Ottoman nights. There is no hurry. Let the details wash over you, the chill of dawn in a silent garden, the shimmer of lanterns across festival crowds, the laughter and longing carried in the city's spring breezes. This is not history to conquer, but history to rest in, a tapestry of the slow and the small, woven for those who listen in the quiet hours before sleep. So, let your mind wander. Let your eyes grow heavy. This is the story beneath the petals, the secret life of the Ottoman tulip, and the ordinary people who made a forgotten world bloom. Welcome to Boring History for Sleep, the Ottoman Empire's endless love affair with tulips. You lie back and let your mind drift, not toward the clamor of conquest or the thunder of empire, but to something quieter, slower, and, if you're honest, a bit more peculiar. The year is sometime in the late 16th century. The place. The heart of the Ottoman Empire, in a world that's turning more colorful by the year. Tonight we begin with a flower. A tulip. It's strange, perhaps, to think that the mighty Ottomans, conquerors of Constantinople and rulers of a world that stretched from Budapest to Baghdad, would fall under the spell of a mere bulb. But history is rarely about the loudest voices. Sometimes it's about the quiet things, the slow growth, the patient waiting, the delicate negotiations that shape the color of a single petal. You're not standing in a battlefield tonight. You're kneeling in the damp earth beside a gardener, sleeves rolled up, hands stained with dirt, eyes searching for that first green shoot that means the world has changed. But before there was a fever, there was only curiosity. The tulip story does not begin in Istanbul. It begins somewhere east, in the stony uplands of Central Asia, where wild tulips, small and fierce, bloom in the rocky crevices of the steppe. These are not the plump, cultivated bulbs you know today. They are tough. Their petals are streaked with flame. They thrive in harsh winds and brief, cool springs, known only to nomads and shepherds and the occasional trader with a sharp eye. At some point, centuries before anyone in Istanbul cared for gardens, these wild tulips crossed paths with the silk. Traders carried precious bulbs, tucked into saddlebags hidden among spices and silk, westward toward Persia. There in the Persian courts, tulips became something new, a symbol of refinement, a painter's favorite subject, a poet's metaphor for unattainable beauty. The Ottomans, expanding steadily through Anatolia and into the rich lands of the former Byzantine world, inherited much from Persia: poetry, patterns, palaces, and soon enough tulips. It is difficult to pinpoint the moment when the tulip arrived in Ottoman lands. There are hints: a Persian noble's gift to a sultan, a merchant's shipment noted in a ledger, a curious mention in a court diary. But by the late 1500s, the tulip is no longer rare. It is a quiet presence in palace gardens and city courtyards, its bulb regarded with the reverence once reserved for jewels. What made the Ottomans fall for tulips so deeply? The answer is, as with most things in history, complicated. Flowers had always held a special place in Islamic art and philosophy, symbols of paradise, reminders of the fleeting nature of life, objects of contemplation. The Prophet Muhammad himself is said to have admired the rose, and gardens were a favored retreat for rulers and scholars alike. But the tulip had something different, a combination of strength and delicacy, a shape that lent itself to endless artistic imitation. Its petals closed tight at night and opened with the dawn, a rhythm of sleep and waking that matched the Ottoman taste for subtlety and discipline. Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, who reigned from 1520 to 1566, is often remembered for his military campaigns and legal reforms. But in quieter moments, he was also a lover of gardens, a man who found solace among the cypress and hyacinth, who commissioned fountains and shaded walkways, who counted the opening of a new flower as a small but meaningful victory. Suleiman's court poets wrote of tulips tenderly, almost reverently, while his artists wove their shape into carpets, ceramics, and illuminated manuscripts. Yet it wasn't until later, under Sultan Ahmed III, 1703-1730, that tulip mania truly erupted. But for now, as the 16th century slides gently toward dusk, the empire is simply getting used to a new guest. Tulips spread from palace to villa, from mosque courtyards to the humble homes of the city's artisans. Bulbs are swapped at the market alongside onions and garlic. Children pluck petals and float them in fountains. In the city's labyrinth of narrow streets, gardeners with more ambition than sense try crossbreeding, hoping to find the elusive perfect bloom. Imagine, for a moment, the daily rhythm of an Istanbul gardener in 1585. You rise before dawn, just as the city's muezzins begin their call. Your small plot is damp and fragrant, the air still cool before the heat sets in. You check your bulbs. Some have failed, rotted in the dark. Others, miraculously, have sprouted. You thin them with a careful hand, measuring distances with your fingers, hoping for a bloom that's both symmetrical and surprising. The work is repetitive, sometimes tedious. There are no miracles here, only slow, patient labor. Bulbs are divided and replanted, watered and watched. The right mixture of sand and clay, the right amount of winter chill. Too much water and the bulb will rot. Too little and it will sleep forever. But the promise is always there, in the faint green curl of a new leaf, in the slow unfolding of color, in the hope that this year, This season, your garden will outshine your neighbors, or even catch the eye of a passing official. For gardeners, as for sultans, the tulip is a matter of pride. You might wonder, why all this fuss over a flower? Weren't there more important things to worry about in an empire of this size? Taxes, wars, rebellions, the fate of a city always perched on the edge of disaster? But perhaps that's the point. In a world of uncertainty, the tulip offered a small contained beauty, something you could nurture with your own hands, something predictable in its way. The soil, the bulb, the water, the weight. Even in the palace, with its intrigues and shifting fortunes, a flower could be trusted to bloom or not according to laws no vizier could bend. It is not just the rich who care. As tulips trickle down through society, their meanings change. For a merchant, a tulip is a status symbol, a conversation piece. For a craftsman, it's inspiration, a shape to carve or paint. For a widow, it might be the only beauty she can afford to grow on her window ledge. The city comes alive each spring with bursts of color, crimson, yellow, streaked with flame. Tulip bulbs become small treasures, hoarded, traded, envied. But there is something else, something quietly unsettling about the way this fever grows. Already whispers begin to circulate about the prices paid for rare bulbs. Already there are rumors of theft, of fraud, of fortunes made and lost overnight. In the city's coffee houses, men speak in hushed tones about the latest break in the gardens. A new variety, a prize bloom, a bulb so rare its owner sleeps with it beside his bed. And yet, in this early stage, it is still mostly innocence, mostly joy. The city is changing, but no one knows quite where this will lead. As night falls over the gardens of Istanbul, the last rays of sun catch the tips of the tulips, turning them to flame. You, the listener, might find yourself wondering, what was it about this flower that made an empire lose its head? And what price would the Ottomans ultimately pay for their obsession? You settle in, letting the day slip away as the city of Istanbul, then Constantinople to the west, and simply the city, to its citizens, slowly transforms under the sway of its new obsession. It's no longer just a question of flowers in the garden. The tulip has started to infect the very fabric of daily life, weaving itself into art, commerce, and ambition. You are about to witness the strange, almost invisible rise of a mania. By the early 18th century, Istanbul is a city of contradictions, so the minarets reach skyward, calling the faithful to prayer 5 times a day, while the backstreets throng with markets, water cellars, and the constant hum of commerce. The empire, for all its military might and centuries of glory, has entered a quieter period, sometimes called the Tulip Era, a time when peace and prosperity let people turn their minds, for once, away from swords and toward subtler delights. It begins, as all obsessions do, with the elite. Sultan Ahmed III, ascending to the throne in 1703, inherits not only the empire but also a restless nobility and a capital hungry for spectacle. Ahmed himself is a curious character, neither the mightiest nor the wisest of sultans, but certainly among the most imaginative. He delights in poetry and calligraphy, surrounds himself with artists and musicians, and most of all seeks beauty wherever it can be found. It is under his watchful gaze that the tulip becomes the emblem of an age. Imagine, for a moment, a typical evening at the palace. Lanterns flicker along the Bosphorus, reflecting in the dark water. In the royal gardens, carefully tended by generations of gardeners, tulip beds unfurl in the moonlight, velvety blacks, fiery oranges, mysterious purples. Nobles and courtiers gather in the shade, sipping sherbet and reciting verses. The palace musicians play softly, and the sweet, heavy scent of flowers drifts on the night air. Tulip festivals, once a private pastime for sultans and their closest confidants, now become citywide spectacles. Each spring, Ahmed III throws open the palace gates for grand celebrations. Poets compose odes to particular blooms, competing for the sultan's favor. The imperial kitchens turn out sugary confections shaped like tulips. Musicians compose new melodies for the season, but this is only the visible tip of the fever. Beyond the palace walls, the mania spreads. Wealthy merchants, eager to outdo each other, commission vast gardens filled with rare and exotic tulip varieties. Competition for bulbs becomes fierce. An entire industry springs up around the cultivation and trade of tulip bulbs. Nurseries, both legal and illicit, begin to appear on the outskirts of the city, each promising unique and coveted blooms. Soon, the tulip isn't just a flower. It's a commodity. Bulb prices climb at a dizzying pace. For the rarest varieties, those with peculiar streaks, double petals, or colors seen nowhere else, fortunes are made and lost overnight. The market for tulips resembles in some ways a high-stakes game of chance. Men with no experience in gardening become overnight experts, speculating wildly. Rumors swirl of bulbs being sold for the price of a small house, or even a vineyard. It is a fever driven by dreams, of beauty, of status, of sudden wealth. Yet for every success story there are whispers of ruin. Some bulbs fail to flower, victims of poor care or outright fraud. Unscrupulous dealers sell common bulbs as rare ones, cheating hopeful buyers. There are stories, half-believed, half-invented, of duels fought over a misrepresented bloom, of friendships lost to envy, of officials quietly shuffling money from the treasury into a new kind of beauty. In the weaver's stalls, patterns shift. Where once there were geometric designs and cypresses, now tulip motifs bloom on carpets, on caftans, on the very tiles that line the mosques. Even language changes. New slang arises, inspired by the colors and varieties of tulips. Secret societies form among bulb collectors, each with its own rituals and codes. There are, of course, those who remain unmoved. For the city's poor, the porters, the seamstresses, the sellers of roasted chestnuts, the tulip fever is a distant, almost incomprehensible thing. Their lives remain centered on the price of bread, the next day's work, the chance to avoid the ever-present hand of officialdom. But even among them, the fever leaves its mark. The occasional bulb snuck into a window box, a scrap of fabric with a flowered pattern, purchased for a daughter's wedding. And then there are the gardeners. In quiet moments, the real heart of the mania lies here, in the endless experimentation, the cross-pollination, the laborious record-keeping. Ottoman gardeners, often the sons of peasants or freed slaves, rise to positions of great influence if they can produce a truly remarkable bloom. Success means not just pride, but the possibility of a better life, perhaps even a place in the palace gardens themselves. They keep secret notebooks, passing down knowledge through whispered instructions and hidden codes. Some are obsessed with purity, the perfect white, the flawless red. Others are gamblers, always searching for a freak mutation, a new streak of color, a petal with an unexpected curl. One such gardener, whose name never appears in the Grand Chronicles, spent his life perfecting a tulip so dark it was almost black, a bloom so prized that, when it finally flowered, the Sultan himself made a pilgrimage to see it. Stories like these circulate in the coffee houses. Tales of chance, of luck, of the smallest hands reshaping the taste of an empire. But all manias run on borrowed time. Even as the fever rages, dissent grows. Religious scholars grumble that, too, much attention is being paid to frivolity while the empire's morals suffer. Conservative officials worry that vast fortunes are being wasted on bulbs instead of on defending the borders or feeding the hungry. There is, beneath the surface, an undercurrent of anxiety. It all comes to a head one spring night at the height of the festival season. The city is awash in flowers, lanterns strung from palace to palace, the air thick with music and perfume. Nobles and poets gather in the gardens for a night of excess, revelry that will later be blamed in part for the empire's woes. Outside the palace, the city's poorer citizens watch from the shadows, feeling more distant from their rulers. than ever before. As the night wears on, a rumor spreads. A rare bulb, the Lale-i-Nevruz, has just been sold for a sum greater than the annual salary of a high-ranking official. The buyer is anonymous. The seller, it said, is leaving the city by boat at dawn, pockets filled with gold. The tension is almost palpable. What began as a quiet love affair between an empire and a flower has become something else. A fever that grips rich and poor alike, that distorts value, that hints at dangers no one can quite name. You might find yourself wondering, when does a simple pleasure become a dangerous obsession? What happens to a city and an empire when the fever finally breaks? You're still in the heart of Istanbul, the city breathing in the quiet after the storm of petals. In the cool dawn after yet another extravagant tulip festival, the cobbled streets are sticky with spilled sherbet and petals. Crimson, gold, purple cling to sandals and the hem of every robe. Somewhere, a gardener's calloused fingers count out the bulbs he risked his entire savings on, while an official in the palace sits awake, tallying debts, his mind racing far from the music and laughter that just hours before filled the air. Every mania must have its reckoning. For the Ottoman tulip fever, the end came not in a single dramatic crash, but in a slow, almost embarrassed retreat. A fading of enthusiasm, a gradual cooling of the passion that once set the city alight. The first cracks appear among the very people who lit the fire. The palace elite. Ahmed III, who once seemed to float on a cloud of poetry and blossoms, finds himself hemmed in by anxieties both real and imagined. The empire's borders grow, restless. Janissaries, the fearsome soldiers who enforce the sultan's will, grumble about extravagance and favoritism. There are mutterings in the coffee houses. How can a sultan who spends so much on flowers truly care for the empire's people? Tulip prices, which seem to know only one direction, begin to wobble. There are too many bulbs now, too many speculators, too many stories of ruined fortunes. The rarest blooms, once worth a year's wages, are suddenly just another flower in the market. Merchants who built fortunes in the bulb trade vanish overnight, leaving behind only debts and empty promises. The city's storytellers, quick to sense the shift, begin spinning cautionary tales about those who lost everything for the sake of a flower. In the back alleys and small shops, gardeners shake their heads. They'd warned all along that nature couldn't be rushed, that a bulb would only bloom when and how it pleased. But few listened. Now the imperial gardeners return to their routines, tending the sultan's beds with a stoic patience, waiting for the city's fever to subside. But the true reckoning comes in 1730. It starts with a rebellion. The Patrona Halil revolt is, on the surface, a response to many things: economic hardship, social unrest, the ever-widening gap between rich and poor. But in the pamphlets and speeches of the rebels, tulips come to symbolize everything that's gone wrong. The rebels denounce the palace's extravagance, the waste, the distance between the sultan and his subjects. Crowds storm the palace, trampling the once prized gardens, tearing up bulbs that only months before were worth their weight in gold. Ahmed III, the sultan who presided over the age of tulips, is forced to abdicate. The new rulers are quick to ban festivals, to close the palace gardens to the public, to insist on a return to austerity and order. The city's mood shifts almost overnight. Tulips, once the mark of refined taste, now carry the hint of shame, of foolishness of an era that everyone suddenly wants to forget. And yet, history, as you've learned by now, rarely moves in straight lines. The tulip fever passes, but the tulip itself remains. The Ottoman love affair with the flower never fully disappears. Even as the mania fades, tulips continue to bloom in private gardens and mosque courtyards, in quiet corners where old gardeners still tend their beds with the same slow devotion. The bulb traders who survived the crash become more cautious, more secretive. The artists and poets, always the true custodians of memory, never really let go. Tulip motifs linger on textiles and ceramics, in the illuminated margins of books, in the verses whispered at spring gatherings. If you wander Istanbul today, centuries after the fever broke, you'll find tulips everywhere. They appear in the mosaics of Hagia Sophia, in the delicate tiles of Topkapi Palace, on the wrought iron gates of old cemeteries. Every spring the city hosts a tulip festival, tamer, yes, than the revels of Ahmed's day, but no less beautiful for its restraint. Fields of flowers paint the city's parks and boulevards, a quiet echo of the fever that once gripped an empire. What, then, does this episode tell us about history and about ourselves? Maybe it's that even in the greatest empires, people crave beauty, ritual, and the thrill of chasing the perfect bloom. Maybe it's that obsessions, no matter how frivolous they seem, can shape the fate of nations. Or maybe, simply, it's that the things we grow in our gardens and our hearts are never really lost, even when the fever passes. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, you might wonder, what other small things in history, quiet passions, everyday obsessions, shaped worlds in ways no army ever could? When the fever ends, what do we choose to remember, and what do we quietly plant again, hoping for a better bloom? You drift into the cool, perfumed heart of Topkapi Palace, where every corner holds a secret, and every flowerbed hums with stories. It's the early 1700s, the height of the Ottoman tulip era. The Bosphorus glimmers beyond marble terraces, and spring breezes carry the fragrance of thousands of blooms. You aren't a sultan or a vizier tonight, just an invisible guest, wandering through the hidden world of courtly intrigue, a world where tulips speak in ways words never could. Within these walls, power doesn't thunder, it whispers. The sultan's voice is rarely raised, yet every decision ripples outward like a pebble dropped into a still pool. Rivalries are carefully cultivated, like the palace's rarest tulip beds, and nothing, absolutely nothing, is accidental. If you were to pause near the colonnades or slip behind a hedge in the gardens, you'd see that even the arrangement of flowers is deliberate, layered with meaning and intent. The palace itself is an intricate machine. Eunuchs drift quietly through the halls, silent as shadows, tending to the sultan's will. Pages run errands, eyes lowered, lips sealed. Viziers and advisors cluster in quiet corners, sharing news, trading favors. Women of the harem, denied formal power, send messages in code, sometimes written, more often floral. For them, a single tulip petal, left on a silk cushion or slipped into a handkerchief, can carry the weight of a threat, a plea, or a promise. In this rarefied world, the language of tulips is understood by everyone who matters. Black tulips, so rare that even the Sultan himself possesses only a handful, are tokens of warning, sent to signal caution or to mark the end of a career. A yellow tulip, cheerful to the untrained eye, hints at a hidden agenda. Crimson blooms mean favor. A striped tulip achieved only through careful years-long crossbreeding suggests subtlety and strategy. Even the gardeners, often slaves or sons of peasants yet trusted with the empire's greatest treasures, know the code, and they use it to their advantage. As the sun rises over Topkapi, the Sultan's gardeners move quietly among the beds. Their hands are skilled, their eyes sharp. They listen as much as they work, overhearing confidences meant only for the flowers. They are loyal first to the gardens, then to the Sultan, and only rarely to the swirling, shifting world of palace. Politics. A clever gardener might save a life with a warning or doom a rival by letting a certain flower wilt, accidentally, before a crucial ceremony. You notice the rhythm of palace life, the way every act, from a glance in the harem to the offering of a bouquet at dinner, is weighed, calculated, observed. The Sultan himself, Ahmed III, presides over this delicate game. His reign is remembered for its parties and pageantry, but behind the festivals lies a restless energy. Ahmed loves beauty, calligraphy, poetry, and especially tulips, but he knows that every show of favor can make or break an ambitious courtier. He rewards loyalty with rare bulbs and dismisses failed advisors with nothing but a single, faded petal. His favorites are the women of the harem, each of whom has learned to read the subtle messages that pass among the flower beds. One consort, Saliha, is renowned for her cunning. Her rivals say she can send an entire conversation with the way she plucks a bloom and tucks it behind her ear. Saliha has survived where others have vanished, and her garden is always the most carefully tended, the colors bright and impossible to miss. Outside, a new festival is being planned. The Tulip Festival, once a small affair, has grown into a citywide spectacle, a way for the Sultan to dazzle the people, distract the nobility, and mask the tremors beneath the empire's polished surface. This year, rumors swirl that Ahmed has acquired a new breed of tulip, deep blue, impossible, a color that exists nowhere else in the city. Some say it's a symbol of the Sultan's hope for peace. Others suspect it hides a warning to his enemies. You drift among the courtiers as they gossip and speculate. A vizier who's fallen out of favor arranges for a gardener to lose his assigned bouquet. Another courtier, seeking advancement, sneaks a rare bulb into a gift for the Sultan, hoping it will be noticed. The air is thick with unspoken rivalries, with bargains made in the dark and sealed with nothing more than a blossom. Inside the harem, intrigue is just as intense. The chief consort, wary of Saliha's influence, offers the Sultan a basket of tulips grown from bulbs supposedly blessed by a mystic. The gesture is both a prayer for protection and a subtle challenge, a way to remind Ahmed that power even here is never absolute. The younger women watch closely, learning to read the signs. For them, a tulip petal dropped on the threshold of a rival's chamber can signal war. A bloom left on a windowsill can promise friendship or allegiance. The gardeners, meanwhile, keep their own counsel. They know the city's secrets, which noble has been banished, which courtier has risen or fallen, who has won or lost the Sultan's favor. Sometimes they pass messages between the harem and the council chambers using flowers as code. More often they keep silent, knowing that too much knowledge is as dangerous as too little. As the festival approaches, tension mounts. The Sultan's advisors debate the placement of each tulip bed. The chief eunuch, responsible for palace security, inspects the gardens daily, searching for signs of tampering or sabotage. The women of the harem plot their next moves, watching for the first sign that their fortunes may change. But beneath it all, the flowers keep growing. The tulips open with the dawn, close at dusk, their petals catching the light in 1,000 different shades. The gardeners work quietly, their hands shaping the beauty that everyone in the palace depends on, yet few truly understand. One evening, as the sun sets over the Bosphorus and the palace lanterns begin to glow, a single black tulip is found crushed on the threshold of the chief consort's chamber. No one knows how it got there. Some say it's a warning, others whisper it's a promise. The Sultan says nothing, but his eyes linger on the flower for just a moment too long. You leave the palace that night with more questions than answers. In a world where every gesture is layered with meaning, how long can anyone keep their secrets when even the flowers speak? What hope is there for silence? You wake in the pre-dawn hush of Topkapi Palace, the great city beyond its walls still wrapped in gray silence. But here, in the heart of power, life stirs early, earlier than the first call to prayer, earlier than the first caress of sunlight on marble domes. The gardeners are already at work, slipping between flower beds, making sure every tulip stands straight and every color is perfectly aligned. Today, everything must be flawless. The festival is only days away, and the smallest imperfection could ripple through the palace like a stone cast in still water. The festival is more than just a display of beauty. It is an elaborate game of politics. For the Sultan, it is a chance to reaffirm control, his generosity, his taste, his subtlety. For his viziers, it is a test. Each advisor, every rival, knows that their future might rest on how the Sultan interprets a single gesture, a single bloom. What looks like celebration is in fact a contest, one played without rules, where power and downfall are as fleeting as petals in the wind. Ahmed III, the Sultan, surveys his empire from shaded balconies. In his youth, he was a poet and a dreamer, but years on the throne have sharpened his mind. He sees the beauty, yes, but also the dangers hiding in every shadow. The Tulip Festival is his invention, but it is also his responsibility. He knows the wrong rumor, the wrong flower, the wrong guest could turn celebration into disaster. In the days leading up to the festival, The palace becomes a hive of activity. Musicians rehearse new songs. Cooks invent new confections. Artists paint intricate invitations, gilded and perfumed. In the harem, excitement and fear intertwine. The women compete, sometimes openly, sometimes in whispers, for the sultan's favor. Tulips, carefully selected, become gifts, bribes, even veiled threats. It is tradition for the women to present the sultan with bouquets, each arrangement a silent letter. A certain color or combination of blooms can hint at longing, regret, ambition, or warning. The chief consort, Saliha, is a master of this language. She crafts a bouquet heavy with rare white tulips, symbols of purity, but also distance. She wants the sultan's protection, but she also wants to remind him of her independence, her mysterious origins from a far-off land. Her rivals, less skilled, mimic her choices, but never with the same subtlety. In another corner of the palace, a lesser consort plots. She has heard rumors, half true, half fantasy, of a rare blue tulip, rumored to bloom only once every 100 years. If she can obtain even a single petal, her place at court could be secured. She slips coins to a gardener, whispers her request, and waits. The gardener, uncertain but unwilling to risk the lady's wrath, promises to try. He knows the risks. To tamper with the festival's arrangements is to risk everything. The male courtiers and viziers have their own games. Gifts of bulbs are exchanged quietly, each one carrying a subtle message. To give a black tulip is to issue a challenge. To give a striped tulip is to signal alliance. One ambitious young vizier, new to the intrigues of the court, makes a mistake. He offers a red and yellow bloom to a rival, not realizing the color combination hints at betrayal. His rival, far more experienced, smiles, accepts the gift, and begins laying traps of his own. In the palace kitchens, the staff gossip about the festival's preparations. Some believe the sultan has grown weary of tulips, that this year will be the last festival. Others claim to have seen secret meetings between the chief gardener and foreign diplomats, suggesting that the politics of the tulip have grown international, that the empire's rivals want to know the secret codes hidden among the petals. As the festival draws near, tension tightens like a bowstring. The night before, the sultan calls for a private stroll through the gardens. He is accompanied only by his chief consort, a trusted advisor, and two of the oldest gardeners. The air is thick with anticipation. Even the nightingales seem to fall silent. The sultan pauses by a bed of black tulips, lost in thought. Every flower has its season, he says softly, but some are not meant to last. His advisor tries to decipher the meaning. Does the sultan mean the flowers, the festival, or perhaps someone at court? The gardeners keep their eyes fixed on the soil, not daring to meet the sultan's gaze. In the darkness, you sense the palace holding its breath. Morning arrives. The festival begins. The city's great and good arrive at Topkapi in a stream of carriages, each bearing gifts and anxieties. The courtyards are transformed by endless blooms. Musicians play, children laugh, and trays of sweets circulate. But beneath the laughter, the old games continue. Saliha presents her bouquet with a bow, her eyes never leaving the sultan's face. The lesser consort watches, desperate for her chance. The viziers position themselves carefully, reading every glance, every gesture. But then a shock. The rare blue tulip rumored for weeks is missing from the central display. It should have been the festival's crown jewel. The gardeners are frantic. The chief eunuch questions everyone. Whispers fill the air. Was it stolen? Destroyed? Or did it never exist at all? A clever trick of courtly rumor. The sultan, his expression unreadable, simply smiles and turns away. All day the question lingers. Old alliances are tested, new rivalries born. The blue tulip becomes a legend, a story whispered behind fans and in the shadows of the harem. You can almost feel the palace shifting, a sense that something fragile has been disturbed, that the old codes might no longer be enough to keep chaos at bay. As the sun sets, the tulip beds glow in the last golden light, and you find yourself wondering, if even the rarest flower can vanish without a trace, What else might be lost or hidden beneath the surface of beauty and power? When secrets grow too tangled, can any language, floral or otherwise, ever truly keep them safe? Evening deepens, and the festival shifts from spectacle to something quieter, almost secretive. Lanterns light the paths between the tulip beds, their glow transforming the gardens into a dreamscape. The city beyond the palace falls away. Only this moment matters, charged with anticipation and dread. The palace's greatest powers gather not in the grand halls but in the shadows, behind hedges, beneath arches, beside the still waters of the ornamental pools. Word of the missing blue tulip has already reached every ear. Some believe it never existed. Others suspect a rival's sabotage. The Sultan moves through the crowd with a practiced grace, pausing here and there to accept bouquets, to offer a word or a glance. Every interaction is watched, measured, parsed for meaning. Saliha, the chief consort, holds her head high, her bouquet still intact, but there is a tremor in her voice as she greets the Sultan. She cannot help but wonder if she has misread some vital sign, or if her enemies are closing in. Across the garden, the lesser consort who schemed for the blue tulip tries to hide her disappointment. She offers a substitute, a vivid purple bloom, but it goes unnoticed. Among the viziers, tensions boil beneath the surface. The young advisor who blundered with his gift finds himself suddenly isolated, his invitations withdrawn. Rumors swirl about who might have stolen the blue tulip, if it was stolen at all. Some suspect the gardeners, others blame the eunuchs. The gardeners themselves move silently, fixing trampled beds, overhearing everything and saying nothing. As night deepens, the Sultan retires to a small pavilion at the edge of the gardens, accompanied by his most trusted confidant. He gazes out over the lantern-lit flowers, silent for a long time. Finally, he speaks. Beauty and power both are fleeting. The wise know when to let go. His confidant nods, unsure whether the Sultan means the festival, his reign, or something deeper. Inside the palace, a meeting takes place among the harem women. Old grievances are aired. The story of the blue tulip is retold in a dozen versions. Some believe Saliha engineered the theft, others think it's a warning from the Sultan. A few suspect the gardeners. After all, they know more about the palace's hidden life than anyone else. Eventually, the festival winds down. Guests leave, servants extinguish lanterns, and the palace falls quiet. The gardens, once a stage for ambition and intrigue, settle into darkness. Only a few tulips remain standing, their petals illuminated by moonlight. The secrets for now remain safe. But in the months that follow, the impact of that night lingers. Old alliances fracture. A new favorite rises in the harem. The vizier who lost favor is quietly dismissed, sent to govern a distant province. The story of the blue tulip becomes legend, a symbol of the risks and rewards of playing the palace's most dangerous games. In the end, the language of tulips survives, but it grows more complicated, its codes more difficult to read. You drift off, thinking of petals and secrets, power and beauty, and of all the stories history leaves half told. If every flower is a message, who will listen when the garden grows wild? When the code breaks, what will remain? Beauty, memory, or only silence? You awake on a chilly dawn in the year 1725, not within the comfort of a palace, but in a cramped caravanserai on the Anatolian plateau. The world is just beginning to lighten. Cold stone presses against your back, and the air is thick with the scents of animals, straw, and distant coffee. Your journey is not one of conquest or glory, but of commerce, a thread in the endless tapestry of the Ottoman Empire, stretching from the vineyards of Edirne to the bustling docks of Istanbul and beyond. You are a tulip merchant, a humble but determined figure in a world that suddenly cares a great deal about flowers. In your battered leather satchel, nestled carefully among straw and scraps of parchment, rest the treasures of your trade, rare tulip bulbs. Each bulb is small, unassuming, coated with a dusting of soil and mystery. To the untrained eye, they look like common onions. To those in the know, they are currency, status, and hope for a better year. Your route is long and treacherous, crossing hills and river valleys, weaving through villages and fortified towns. For most, tulips are a distant rumor, a thing of the sultan's gardens and the city's wealthy. For you, every bulb is a risk, a wager against thieves, weather, bureaucracy, and the whims of taste. Trade in the Ottoman Empire is an elaborate dance. The state is everywhere, collecting taxes, issuing permits, manning border posts. Even flowers are not immune. Before your journey, you paid a tax on the bulbs themselves, then a fee for the right to transport them across provincial lines. You carry stamped papers in your belt, one from the Guild of Florists, another from the local aga, and yet another bearing the faded seal of the palace itself, granting you permission to bring your wares into Istanbul. You set out before dawn, moving quickly to avoid the worst of the heat. At every checkpoint, a wooden barrier manned by sleepy guards, or a stone post at the edge of a walled town, you must show your papers, answer the same questions, sometimes offer a bulb or two, as a bribe. The guards don't care about tulips, not really. They care about their cut. Still, there are rules, and you have learned them all by heart. Sometimes, though, the rules change. Today the sky is heavy with clouds, and you make your way along a muddy road toward Bursa, a city famous for its markets and gardens. Other traders travel with you, some with sacks of grain, others with silk or spices. They regard your satchel with suspicion or envy, but rarely with understanding. A flower is a flower, one mutters. What fool pays gold for dirt? You say nothing. There are fortunes hidden in the dirt if you know where to look. Reaching Bursa, you navigate the tangled lanes of the bazaar. It is a labyrinth. Shops spilling over with copper pots, bolts of fabric, heaps of dried fruit. But you head for a quieter courtyard, where the Florists' Guild keeps its office. Here, trade is formal, even ceremonial. You present your bulbs, and the guild's inspector, an old man with ink-stained hands, examines each one with care. He notes the variety, the provenance, the health. He stamps your papers with a flourish and, in return for a small gift, allows you to keep moving. Your route now runs east, through valleys carved by rivers and dotted with sleepy villages. Sometimes the journey is easy. Gentle hills, good roads, the company of other traders who know how to keep their mouths shut. Sometimes it's a nightmare. Mudslides, bandits, outbreaks of disease. You hear stories in every tavern. A caravan attacked on the road to Iznik, a nobleman's gardens ravaged by thieves, a crop of bulbs rotting in storage ruined by an early thaw. The real danger, though, lies not in nature but in paperwork. The Ottomans love their records. Every bulb must be accounted for, every transaction recorded. You carry a ledger, its pages covered in careful script, tracking your inventory, your debts, your customers' promises. At every border, officials demand to see your papers. Sometimes they let you pass, sometimes they keep you waiting for hours, even days. You've learned to be patient, to smile, to offer a bulb here and there as encouragement. Istanbul lies ahead, glittering at the edge of the Sea of Marmara. The city is everything you have dreamed of. Huge, loud, impossible. Minarets spike the sky. Markets crowd every square. Here, the value of a bulb can triple overnight or fall to nothing if fashion shifts or a rival undercuts your price. You make your way to the florist's quarter near the old Byzantine walls. The air is thick with the scent of cut flowers, sawdust, and sweat. Dealers haggle over crates of bulbs, arguing over price, origin, and color. The trade here is even more complicated than on the road. There are brokers, middlemen who buy in bulk and resell to the city's wealthy. There are palace officials always on the lookout for a rare specimen to impress the Sultan. There are fraudsters, selling painted bulbs or passing off common varieties as rare. Every deal is a negotiation. Every handshake carries the risk of betrayal. You spend your days moving between shops and gardens, your nights tallying your ledgers by candlelight. You track the price of every variety, learning which families are in favor at court, which guilds are rising or falling. You keep an ear out for rumors, a failed crop in Edirne, a new variety spotted in the palace gardens, a crackdown on black market traders. But the trade is not just business. It is also survival. For many, tulips offer a rare chance at upward mobility. A peasant who discovers a new variety might earn enough to buy land, to send a child to school, to escape a life of endless toil. For others, the trade is a trap. Debts pile up, rivals plot ruin. Officials confiscate entire shipments for some technicality or imagined offense. Sometimes the tension becomes too much. You witness arguments in the marketplace, fists raised, voices hoarse, bulbs smashed underfoot. You hear of merchants ruined by a single bad deal, of families forced to sell their homes after a shipment goes missing. But you also hear stories of luck. A gardener whose accidental crossbreeding produced a bloom so beautiful the Sultan sent for him personally, changing his life forever. The bureaucracy, for all its maddening complexity, does offer some stability. The Florists Guild protects its members, enforcing rules, settling disputes, punishing fraud. The Sultan's agents keep a close eye on the trade, sometimes intervening to prevent chaos. Taxes are high, but they also pay for roads, guards, and market inspectors, small comforts in a dangerous business. Late one evening, after another long day in the bazaar, you visit the city's great gardens. Here, at last, you see the results of your labor. Beds of tulips in every shade, glowing in the soft light. Courtiers stroll along gravel paths, pointing out rare varieties and whispering gossip. Children run between the beds, their laughter echoing over the water. For a moment, you allow yourself to imagine that all the bureaucracy, the risk, the endless negotiation, maybe it's worth it. Maybe the beauty really does matter. But then you remember your next shipment, your debts, the guards at the city gates, the rumor of a new tax. The work is never done. As you make your way home, you wonder, in a world of endless paperwork and shifting fortunes, what is the true price of beauty? Can a flower, so fragile and fleeting, really be worth so much trouble? And when the empire changes, when fashions shift and fortunes fall, what will become of the traders, the guilds, and the silent laborers who make the gardens bloom? You rise before dawn in Istanbul, your body sore from yesterday's work and your mind already racing with the day's challenges. The city is a living, breathing labyrinth, and as a tulip merchant, you have to know its every twist and turn if you want to survive. Out in the first blue light, before the call to prayer, the city is almost quiet. You hurry down the uneven stones of the old streets toward the market district, heart pounding with the possibility of fortune or disaster. The Istanbul bazaar is like nowhere else in the empire. Roofed arcades twist and branch for miles, and every shopfront hides its own set of secrets. Tulip bulbs are exchanged here in whispered deals, behind iron-banded doors or under canvas awnings, the scent of coffee and tobacco floating in the air. You greet old rivals with careful civility, friends with even more caution. Everyone is watching. Everyone is guessing the real value of your wares. Bureaucracy is everywhere. It's in the hands of the market inspector, who checks your guild, stamp before you can even open your stall. It's in the endless forms that must be filled and signed if you want to move your bulbs from one city quarter to another. You keep a neat ledger, its pages heavy with columns. Date, quantity, origin, price paid, price hoped for, client name, bribes given, bribes received. Some days it feels like you spend more time with ink than with bulbs. Yet the market is also a living network of trust, suspicion, and negotiation. A new official has arrived from Edirne, eager to prove himself. His presence sends ripples through the community. For a few weeks, bribes become riskier, prices more volatile. The Florists Guild meets in secret, deciding how to handle the new man. Some members argue for boldness, others for patience. You keep your head down, watching, learning. Waiting for your chance, your clients come from every corner of society. A palace gardener arrives in disguise, buying bulbs for a new royal display. His accent betrays him, but you say nothing. A wealthy merchant's wife comes with her maid, searching for the rarest colors. She asks questions, but her eyes linger too long on the purple-streaked bulbs, the ones rumored to have magical properties. A foreign diplomat appears at your stall, his translator doing most of the talking. He wants only the best and he'll pay in gold, but his interest makes you uneasy. Is he gathering gifts or gathering secrets? Sometimes it's hard to remember who you are. The market can turn you into a chameleon, charming for the palace, shrewd for the guild, humble for the customs officer, ruthless with your rivals. You keep your real thoughts to yourself, hidden like your best bulbs in a secret compartment beneath the stall. Competition is fierce. Not all rivals play fair. You hear rumors of sabotage, bulbs deliberately mislabeled or infected with fungus before delivery. You check your stock each morning, searching for signs of tampering. Once you catch a young boy with stained hands reaching into your baskets. He runs when you shout, vanishing into the maze of the bazaar. You never discover who sent him, but you double your precautions. Each day you watch the patterns of trade. Some varieties of tulip, once common, have become wildly valuable because a court poet happened to mention them in a new ode. Others, fashionable just last year, now gather dust. You keep your ear to the ground, listening to gossip in coffee houses, watching the faces of palace messengers, reading the subtle signals sent by guild leaders. Money changes hands with dizzying speed. You make a sale in the morning and lose half your profit by noon when news arrives of a new import duty at the docks. By sunset, you've recouped your loss selling a rare bulb to a desperate foreign envoy. There are days when you feel rich, days when you wonder how you'll eat. Taxes are relentless. Every official wants their share, from the Grand Vizier down to the porters who carry your bulbs from one stall to another. The bureaucracy protects you, sometimes. The Florists Guild can mediate disputes, help you collect debts, arrange bulk purchases for public gardens, but the price of their protection is high and their patience is not infinite. Miss a payment, cross the wrong elder, and you could find yourself barred from the market, cut off from the lifeblood of your trade. You are not alone in these struggles. You know the other merchants' stories. One came from Bosnia with nothing but a sack of bulbs and now owns 3 shops. His fortune built on a single shipment of variegated tulips that caught the Sultan's eye. Another, once rich, now sells scrap bulbs from a corner mat, ruined by a single failed harvest, and the envy of his rivals. Some days it feels like the empire itself is built on these struggles. The city's great buildings and gardens, its ships and soldiers, are all supported by the taxes and bribes, hopes and risks of people like you, always hustling, always adapting, always watching for the next threat or opportunity. You find moments of peace only in the evenings when you can walk the edges of the city. In the twilight, away from the clamor of the market, you visit the gardens where your best bulbs will bloom. The sight of a single perfect flower, its color deep and strange, its petals flawless, reminds you why you endure it all. But as the stars come out, your mind turns back to your ledgers, your debts, the endless forms and fees. The empire is vast, and you are only one trader among thousands. Your future depends on the whims of officials, the fashion of courtiers, the quiet calculations of the guild. Tonight, you can't help but wonder if bureaucracy is both the empire's glue and its greatest burden. How long can this delicate balance last? When the paperwork grows thicker than the petals, will beauty, and those who risk everything to bring it, still find a place to bloom? Or will the endless red tape finally choke even the brightest flower? Another year turns. Istanbul's spring. Air is heavy with the scent of new blossoms, but beneath the surface you sense tension building. Trade is as lively as ever, but cracks appear in the system, cracks that threaten to swallow even the most careful merchant. Your business has grown. You have more clients, better connections, a reputation for honesty and rare bulbs. But with growth comes risk. Rivals spread rumors about your stock, accusing you of fraud or theft. Officials look more closely at your paperwork, searching for errors to exploit. The guild demands higher dues, hinting that your success is making others uneasy. The city, too, seems restless. Taxes rise again and a new round of regulations is announced. Merchants protest, but the government is unmoved. You scramble to adapt, changing. Suppliers cutting costs, finding new ways to hide your best bulbs from prying eyes. You think of giving up, moving to a quieter town, but Istanbul's energy holds you fast. Then, suddenly, the market turns. A series of poor harvests in the provinces leads to a shortage of bulbs and prices spike. Everyone scrambles to buy, hoping to ride the wave of speculation. You make money, but you know the boom can't last. Before long, news arrives that the palace, worried about public unrest, has ordered an investigation into the tulip trade. Inspectors flood the market, searching for signs of hoarding, fraud, or price fixing. Panic spreads. Traders dump bulbs at a loss. The guild tries to mediate, but tempers run hot. Fights break out in the market. Several prominent merchants are arrested. Others vanish, their shops boarded up overnight. Your own business weathers the storm, barely. You survive because you kept your debts small, your ledgers honest, your connections strong. But the market is never the same. In the aftermath, a new order emerges. The government imposes stricter controls, setting maximum prices for bulbs, mandating regular audits. The guild is forced to accept new leadership, and several old allies retire or disappear. You adapt, as you always have, but you sense the golden age is ending. Still, the city blooms each spring. The gardens are as beautiful as ever, and for those who endure, the sight of a rare tulip in full flower is a reward beyond measure. You watch the younger merchants start the cycle over, dreaming of fortunes, risking everything, never quite believing the dangers are real. You walk through the market at dusk, the day's last light spilling over stalls and petals, and you wonder, when? The bloom is gone and the profits dry up. What will remain? The memory of beauty? The scars of risk? Or only the endless shuffle of paperwork? Is the flower worth the cost? Or is the cost the flower's truest meaning in this tangled empire? You are standing in the shadowed quiet of the palace gardens at first light, where the air is heavy with dew and the faint sweetness of earth. For most of Istanbul, this hour belongs to the fishermen, the bakers, and the muezzins. But here, deep, within the walled labyrinth of the Sultan's private paradise, the day belongs to the gardeners, the men who make the empire's dreams bloom. History remembers sultans, viziers, and generals. Their deeds are etched in stone, recited by storytellers in coffeehouses, and embroidered on the banners of old mosques. Yet few ever mention the men who coaxed life from dirt, who spent their days with mud-caked hands and aching backs, growing the flowers that would define an age. You, invisible for centuries, are about to walk in their footsteps. The Ottoman Empire, for all its thunder and pageantry, is built on quiet, unseen labor. The Sultan's gardens, sprawling sanctuaries of order and beauty, are the envy of Europe, but their magic begins with simple people from every corner of the empire. There are Greeks from the islands, Armenians from the hills, Tatars from the steppe, Albanians, Slavs, Turks, all drawn to the city by the promise of work, or more often the lack of any other choice. If you listen closely, you can hear their voices as they gather by the garden's edge. The head gardener, called the Bostançıbaşı, leads them through the gates at dawn, his presence unmistakable in his dark robes and stern, lined face. His word is law. He knows every flower, every weed, every crack in the marble fountains. Under him, the junior gardeners and laborers, boys just learning to hold a spade, old men with knotted hands, move with practiced efficiency. The youngest fetch water from the well, the strongest turn the soil, the most trusted tend the rare bulbs that only the Sultan himself may see. For these men, the gardens are both sanctuary and prison. They live in small, tidy quarters beside the compost heaps, eating bread and olives at long wooden tables, talking in low voices after the day's work is done. The lucky ones have families in the city. The unlucky drift from job to job, always hoping for a word of praise or a glimpse of something better. Some are slaves, bought and sold with little thought. Others are free men, but all are bound by duty to the palace and its endless cycle of seasons. Their world is a patchwork of tasks and rituals. There is the digging, the planting, the weeding. There are precise rules for mixing soil, how much sand for drainage, how much dung for nourishment. There are secret recipes for fertilizers, handed, down in whispers from master to apprentice, never written, always remembered. There is the careful tending of the tulip bulbs, rotated from bed to bed, hidden away in cool cellars through the long, humid summer. Most days are uneventful. The gardeners rise in darkness, work until the call to noon prayer, eat, rest, then work again until the sun slips behind the city's domes. But there are moments of urgency, when the Sultan's vizier visits unannounced or a bulb of priceless rarity shows signs of rot. In these moments, the head gardener's authority is absolute. He can command men to dig all night, to move an entire bed of flowers by lantern light, to fetch water from the Bosphorus itself if that's what the Sultan desires. For the gardeners, reputation is everything. The best are known for their patience and precision, for their ability to coax a reluctant bloom or spot the first sign of disease. They take pride in their work, even if their names will never appear in the palace records. Sometimes the Sultan himself walks the gardens at dawn, disguised as a simple courtier. He stops to ask questions about a particular tulip, to admire the straightness of a bed or the cleverness of a new trellis. The gardeners answer with deference, but never with fear. They know that their fortunes rise and fall with the health of the garden, and that the Sultan, for all his power, is as much a prisoner of the flowers as they are. There are dangers, too, in this life of quiet labor. A single failed harvest can mean dismissal, or worse. A bulb stolen, a bed trampled, a rumor of sabotage, and suspicion falls hard and fast. The head gardener keeps careful records in his private ledger, noting which men were on duty, which tools were used, which bulbs were moved. A man found guilty of theft or carelessness is dismissed in disgrace, sometimes whipped, sometimes imprisoned, rarely forgiven. Yet there is fellowship too in this world. The gardeners share their meals, their stories, their small triumphs. They celebrate when a rare flower blooms, mourn when a trusted comrade is sent away. They teach one another tricks, how to cut a stem without bruising it, how to graft a branch for stronger blossoms, how to spot the shadow of blight before it's too late. The youngest learn quickly, or they are sent back to the fields from which they came. Most of all, there is pride. When the palace hosts a festival and the Sultan's guests marvel at the endless carpets of color, it is the gardeners who linger at the edges, watching faces for signs of delight. They rarely receive open praise, but a nod from the head gardener, a coin slipped into a pocket, a few words of approval from a courtier. These are enough. You, unseen observer, can feel the weight of their routine, the ache in their knees, the stubborn stains on their fingers, the quiet hope that the next bloom will be the one to catch the Sultan's eye. These men are the roots of the empire's beauty, their labor as essential as any edict or military campaign. Yet as you walk these morning paths, you begin to wonder, if the gardeners are invisible to history, what other stories are buried in the soil beneath their feet? In an empire obsessed with glory, what does it mean to give your life to something as fleeting as a flower? And when the gardens fade, will anyone remember the hands that made paradise bloom? You return to the gardens as spring deepens and the sun lingers a little longer over the domes of Istanbul. The palace has awakened to the season's promise, and the gardeners move through their daily rituals with even greater urgency. In this hidden world, science and superstition, tradition and innovation, coexist in a delicate dance, each gardener playing his part with quiet determination. The Sultan's tulip beds are legendary, not merely for their beauty but for their endless variety. Every spring, rumors ripple through the city about new shades, blood-red streaks, midnight blacks, impossible golds, emerging from the palace grounds. What the public doesn't see is the hard, careful work behind each bloom. For the gardeners, every flower is the product of patience, risk, and a kind of relentless hope. The head gardener, the Boston Subasha, is both overseer and scientist. In his quarters, shelves sag beneath clay pots and bundles of dried herbs, boxes of rare seeds labeled in a dozen languages, stacks of thick notebooks filled with sketches and scrawled formulas. On some mornings, before the other men rise, he studies the moon's phases or consults old books brought by traders from Persia or Venice. He believes in omens, crows on the garden wall, the scent of rain on dry earth. But he also keeps meticulous records, soil pH, moisture levels, dates of the last frost. The gardeners work in teams, each group assigned to a different section of the grounds. Some specialize in roses or fruit trees, but the tulip beds are the most coveted and the most demanding. Here, nothing is left to chance. The soil must be perfectly mixed, loose but not sandy, rich but not waterlogged. Bulbs are inspected for disease, dusted with ash or clay, stored in cool cellars when the heat grows oppressive. Crossbreeding is a secret art, learned over years of careful observation. A patient gardener can spend a decade coaxing a new pattern from his bulbs, selecting, planting, waiting, and hoping. Sometimes all the work yields nothing but a patch of stubborn green leaves. Other times a single season brings a miracle, a streak of purple where none has ever grown, a shape that echoes the Sultan's favorite poem. When this happens, the gardener is rewarded, sometimes handsomely. His name, if not spoken at court, becomes legend among his peers. Innovation is constant. Some gardeners experiment with imported soils brought by ship from distant shores. Others try new watering schedules, fertilize with crushed shells, or introduce bees to encourage pollination. There is quiet competition between teams, and the head gardener encourages it, knowing that rivalry drives invention. Still, tradition runs deep. Each gardener carries a mental library of family lore, remedies for blight, charms against pests, tricks for encouraging reluctant bulbs to flower. Some sleep with a lucky stone in their pocket. Others murmur prayers as they plant, asking God to bless their labor. Science is honored, but no one is above a little superstition. Tensions sometimes flare. A new recruit, eager to impress, tries a foreign technique and ruins an entire bed. An old master, jealous of a younger man's success, accuses him of stealing secrets. The head gardener listens to complaints with a grave face, but he acts decisively. The gardens are too important for grudges or sabotage. When the Sultan visits, every gardener stands at attention, tools gleaming, hands washed. The Sultan's questions are precise, sometimes uncomfortably so. He wants to know the origins of each rare bulb, the reason for a patch of yellowing leaves, the progress of this season's crossbreeds. A wrong answer can mean disgrace. The right answer can mean a new set of tools, a coin, or rarely a word of praise spoken in front of the court. Most visitors to the gardens never see these moments. For them, the beauty seems effortless, the colors, magic. Only the gardeners know the cost, the blisters and sleepless nights, the anxious calculation of rain and sun, the heartbreak of a failed experiment. Yet pride pushes them forward. When a new tulip blooms, unlike any seen before, it is the gardeners who know what it means. They gather at dusk to admire it, each man quietly hoping his own work will someday produce such a marvel. In these moments, rivalry melts into camaraderie. They share bread, stories, and a deep sense of belonging. They are a family, forged by hardship and the pursuit of perfection. Sometimes, though, accidents or disasters threaten everything. One, spring. A strange fungus invades the bulbs, spreading so quickly that beds must be torn up and burned overnight. The gardeners work without rest, their faces grim, their hands stained. The head gardener leads them, never wavering, his voice low but urgent. They lose dozens of rare bulbs but save hundreds more. When the crisis passes, the Sultan rewards them with a feast, and for one night, the gardens echo with laughter instead. Of orders, there is always the knowledge that nothing lasts. Each year, some bulbs fail to flower. Old men retire or die, and their secrets vanish. Sometimes a new head gardener arrives, sweeping away old methods and demanding new ones. The gardens endure, but they are never the same. As the season turns, and the city prepares for the great tulip festival, the gardeners move with renewed energy. They argue about which blooms to place at the center, which to save for private displays. Each man hopes the Sultan will notice his handiwork, that his name will be whispered in the palace kitchens or the bazaar. Yet most know that glory is fleeting, and that next year, another will take his place. You watch the men as they rest beneath the shade of a great cypress, sharing olives and memories, their laughter blending with the songs of distant birds. For all the empire's splendor, these are the moments that matter. Quiet victories, small kindnesses, the knowledge that their hands have shaped something lasting. And as dusk settles over the gardens, you find yourself asking, in a world obsessed with visible greatness, what is the value of invisible mastery? If the gardeners vanished, would the palace even realize what it had lost? Or would the memory of their quiet genius fade like last season's petals, replaced by new faces, new dreams, new blooms? New blooms. Summer arrives, fierce and golden, pressing heat against the palace stones. The tulip beds, so vibrant just weeks ago, begin to fade. Some flowers drop their petals overnight. Others cling stubbornly to color, defying the sun. The gardeners know this rhythm well. With every ending, a new season waits in the wings. The festival is over. The guests have gone, their praise echoing in empty corridors. For a moment, the gardens are quiet, their beauty almost private again. The head gardener calls his men together for a final inspection. They walk the beds, noting which bulbs performed best, which failed, which need to be moved, divided, or replaced. Records are updated, plans made for next year. Nothing is wasted. Even the spent petals are gathered for compost, a promise of new life to come. Now the hardest work begins. The gardeners dig up the bulbs, carefully drying and sorting them in dark cellars. Every bulb is labeled and counted. Some are sent as gifts to allied courts. Others are saved for experiments or traded among the gardeners themselves. The youngest are given the easiest tasks, cleaning tools, sweeping paths, while the most trusted manage the rarest bulbs, working by lamplight well into the night. Outside, the city's rhythm continues. Traders haggle, fishermen mend nets, children play in the shadows of the great walls. Few give a thought to the palace gardens now hidden from view, their splendor tucked away until spring returns. Only the gardeners remain, quietly at work, shaping the next miracle in silence. Yet, the empire is changing. Whispers of discontent drift through the city. Taxes rise, trade falters, rumors of war slip into conversations like shadows at dusk. Some gardeners worry the Sultan's obsession with flowers has blinded him to more urgent needs. Others argue that beauty, however fleeting, offers solace and hope, a reminder of what the world could be if only for a season. The head gardener, older now, feels the weight of years in his bones. He trains his apprentice carefully, passing on secrets and stories, urging him to remember that every garden is a trust, a link between past and future, a promise made in living color. He knows he will not see another festival. His final wish is simple, that the gardens continue to bloom, no matter what storms may come. One evening, as the city cools and the muezzin's call floats over the water, the gardeners gather for a farewell. They eat bread, drink sweet wine, tell stories of impossible flowers and the sultans who loved them. The apprentice promises to keep the traditions alive, to teach the next generation that greatness is measured not in fame or fortune, but in the care of small things. You watch as the last light slips away, leaving only the memory of color, the promise of new blooms. The gardens will survive, through drought and frost, neglect and renewal. And somewhere, years from now, a child will marvel at a flower, never knowing the names of the men who made it possible. You drift into the night with one last thought. In the end, is it the garden or the gardener that endures? Do the hands that shaped beauty matter if the world forgets them? Or is the act of creation its own lasting legacy, blooming again and again beneath the surface of history? The sun is sinking low over Istanbul, washing the domes and minarets in molten gold. The city buzzes with anticipation, different from the day's urgency, softer, threaded with music and laughter. As darkness falls, the streets come alive in a new way. For once, the worries of empire, taxes, laws, distant wars fade into the background. Tonight belongs to tulips, to lanterns, and to the slow magic that settles over the city during the great festivals of the Ottoman age. You are a visitor here, free to wander. Step from the narrow alleys of the bazaar, still humming from the days. Trade and find yourself swept along by crowds toward the waterfront. The Bosphorus glimmers with reflections, boats bobbing, their sails furled, the faint call of gulls blending with the laughter of children and the shouts of peddlers selling honeyed pastries and sweet wine. Istanbul is never more beautiful than on festival nights. For weeks, palace gardeners and city officials have prepared for this moment, planting new beds in public squares, stringing lanterns between cypresses, rehearsing musicians and poets, and instructing the city's many guilds on the festival's strict etiquette. It is a display of imperial wealth, but also a gift to the people, a night when rich and poor alike walk the same lantern-lit paths, savor the same air, and lose themselves in color and sound. Tonight, tulips bloom everywhere, not only in the Sultan's palace behind high stone walls, but in every neighborhood. Children have spent the day helping to arrange beds in their courtyards, and housewives have swept their doorsteps, scattering petals for good luck. Even the humblest lane is transformed. 1,000 points of color flicker under the glow of oil lamps, their patterns echoing the stars above. At the heart of the celebration are the imperial gardens, thrown open to the public just once each year. All day, crowds have gathered at the gates, waiting for the chance to walk where sultans and their courtiers once strolled. Now at dusk, the gates swing wide. Guards in embroidered uniforms bow, and a hush falls as the first visitors step onto gravel paths lined with flowers. The sound of water, fountains playing in hidden courtyards, the trickle of rills running between beds, mingles with the low hum of awe and wonder. For the gardeners, tonight is a moment of pride and terror. Months of work culminate in this single evening. The head gardener stands at the entrance, quietly monitoring the crowds, eyes sharp for any stray hand or careless step that might trample a rare bloom. His apprentices hover near the most precious beds, ready to intervene if needed. They know that their fortunes rest on the success of the festival. A single mishap could mean dismissal, or worse. As you move deeper into the gardens, you're swept up by the music. The Sultan's favorite musicians play from a marble pavilion, their melodies floating through the warm air. Dervishes whirl in a private courtyard, skirts fanning out like petals. They're spinning a prayer and a performance in one. Poets take turns reciting verses to rapt listeners, odes to tulips, to beauty, to the city itself. In the shadows, vendors circulate with trays of sweets, pistachio halva, rosewater sherbet, and thin, strong coffee. The crowd is a tapestry of Istanbul's many faces. Guild masters in fine silk stroll beside market porters and fishermen. Daughters of wealthy merchants gaze shyly at students in borrowed coats, while old women in scarves gossip quietly, remembering festivals past. A group of foreign diplomats stands awkwardly near a bed of scarlet tulips, trying to decipher the language of flowers and the subtler politics of Ottoman hospitality. You notice how, as night deepens, the city relaxes its boundaries. Rules bend. For one night, the Sultan's subjects move more freely than usual. Young men and women mingle, emboldened by the anonymity of the festival and the cover of darkness. Musicians take requests. Children chase fireflies between the flower beds, their laughter echoing across the lawns. It is easy to forget, for a few hours, the burdens that usually weigh so heavily. Tonight the city is a garden, and its people are guests at a never-ending feast. The air itself seems softer, scented with blossoms, honey, roasting nuts. Light from thousands of lanterns dances on every surface, gilding even the oldest stones with gold. Yet beneath the joy you sense something else, a yearning, a hunger for beauty that runs deeper than simple pleasure. For some, the festival is a respite from poverty, a glimpse of luxury they will not know again until next year. For others, it is a chance to see and be seen, to make a connection, to start a new chapter. The Sultan's officials mingle with the crowd, keeping a watchful eye, but even they seem to surrender to the music and the color, if only for a night. As midnight nears, the festival's pace slows. Lanterns are relit. The Sultan, it is rumored, is walking among his people disguised, listening to their hopes and complaints, seeing his city with new eyes. Whether or not he truly appears, the story will be told for months, that the ruler of the empire walked under the same lanterns, admired the same blooms, and heard the same music as the humblest of his subjects. You pause at the edge of a pond, watching the reflection of tulips ripple on the water. The noise of the festival fades, replaced by a hush that feels almost sacred. For a moment, Istanbul is united, not by force or fear, but by a shared appreciation for fleeting beauty. Can't help but wonder, When the festival ends and the city wakes to the harsh light of day, will the memory of this night linger? Does beauty have the power to soften hardship even for a single evening? Or is it just a dream, gone with the dawn, as fragile as a petal, as fleeting as the echo of a song? The night is deep now, and the festival's rhythm has shifted. The beginning, everyone flooded to the grand displays, the fountains, the public gardens, the musicians playing beneath silk banners. But as midnight passes, the crowds thin, leaving only those drawn by something deeper, the secrets and shadows that belong to Istanbul after dark. You drift along a narrow path, away from the palace's main lawns. The city feels both enormous and intimate, every lantern casting new patterns, every alley holding fresh surprises. You overhear whispers, stories passed from friend to friend, stranger to stranger, about who was seen with whom, which courtier lingered too long near the Sultan's private beds, what new varieties might be unveiled next year. The Tulip Festival is a stage, and everyone has a part to play. In the flickering lamplight, the boundaries between the city's many worlds blur. You pass a wealthy merchant, drunk on wine and poetry, sharing pastries with his servants, and a pair of street musicians. You see a young janissary, usually stern and untouchable, teaching children to skip stones across a pond. Here, for just a few hours, class and status seem to dissolve, replaced by shared wonder and laughter. Yet beneath the revelry, the city's old games continue. On a secluded bench, a poet recites verses to a veiled woman. His words are careful, but the meaning behind them is clear, a coded promise of love or perhaps of ambition. Just beyond the next turn, two guildmasters lean in close, their conversation hidden by the music and the dark. They exchange more than pleasantries. Tonight's negotiations may lead to tomorrow's fortunes. Even the Sultan's officials, recognizable by their fine cloaks and practiced reserve, drop hints of their own intrigue. They watch the festival, closely noting which citizens appear happiest, who gathers in clusters to gossip, which neighborhoods send the most revelers. Their reports will shape next year's policies, and perhaps determine who is invited behind the palace walls, and who is left outside in the shadows. For the gardeners, the night is both celebration and vigilance. While most of the city basks in the festival's joy, the men who coax these flowers from the earth must guard against accidents and theft. Apprentices patrol the tulip beds, watching for clumsy feet or sticky fingers. Sometimes, a rare bloom disappears, spirited away, by a collector hoping for luck or a rival gardener eager for a new crossbreed. If a thief is caught, the penalty is severe. But the real loss is pride, a scar on the season's hard work. You linger near a group of musicians drawn by the low, sweet sound of a knee flute. The music wraps around you, mixing with the scents of jasmine and smoke. Nearby, an old storyteller, his beard silver, his eyes bright, spins tales for a circle of wide-eyed children. His voice rises and falls, shaping legends of tulip princes, enchanted gardens, and sultans who fell in love beneath a rain of petals. The stories blend history and myth, making the night feel endless, the city timeless. As the hours slip by, the festival takes on an air of intimacy. Friends find each other in the dark, sharing secrets they'd never risk in daylight. Lovers steal away to corners, their laughter muffled by the hum of the crowd. Even those who came alone find comfort in the collective warmth. Strangers united, for a brief night by the promise of beauty. Above it all, the palace glows, its windows lit by hundreds of lamps. It seems distant and unreachable, yet for once its beauty is shared by all. You glimpse a shadow moving across a high balcony, and for a moment, wonder if the Sultan is truly watching, listening to the city's stories, remembering his own youth, his own festival nights. At the water's edge, boats glide by, lanterns swaying at their bows. Some carry courting couples, others bear musicians or trays of sweets from one shore to the other. On the far bank, the poorer districts celebrate in their own way. Homemade lanterns, a handful of tulips in a chipped vase, laughter and songs that drift across the water. For the wealthy, the festival is an opportunity, a place to form alliances, to show off their gardens and their generosity. For the poor, It is a chance to belong, if only for a night, to something grander than daily struggle. All are equals beneath the lantern light, at least until the sun rises again. You watch as a mother carries a sleeping child past beds of white tulips, her steps slow and careful, her face softened by the night. You see old men, usually bitter rivals, sharing a cup of wine and a joke. You catch the gaze of a young gardener, exhausted but proud, surveying the crowds with the satisfaction of a job well done. Yet, you cannot ignore the undercurrents. Some faces are tense, their laughter forced. There are whispers about the cost of the festival, the taxes raised to fund it, the merchants forced to contribute, the quiet resentment of those who feel excluded even as they are welcomed. For every burst of joy there is an edge of worry. How long can this beauty last? How many seasons before the empire's troubles outweigh its pleasures? As dawn approaches, the music softens, and the crowds thin. A hush falls over the gardens as the last lanterns flicker out. The festival's spell is breaking, but its magic lingers in the quiet conversations, the hidden kisses, the memory of color that will brighten even the grayest morning. You find yourself asking, when daylight returns and the masks slip away, what will remain of these Ottoman nights? Are the festival's promises real, or only a dream we share before returning to our separate lives? Does a single night of unity and beauty change anything, or does it only remind us of how much we wish it could? The first light of dawn creeps across the city's rooftops, soft and tentative, painting the Bosphorus with streaks of silver and rose. The festival is over. For a moment, the world holds its breath, caught between the memory of the night and the return of routine. Istanbul feels strangely empty, as if every lantern and blossom has taken a piece of the city's soul with it, leaving behind only silence and the lingering scent of petals on the breeze. You wander through the now deserted streets. The flower beds, trampled and faded, look ordinary in the pale light. The public squares, once alive with music and laughter, are quiet except for a few yawning vendors cleaning up, sweeping away petals and wax. Only the faintest trace of last night's magic remains. A lantern still burning in a shop window, a scrap of music hummed by a passerby, a forgotten pastry lying in the dust. In the palace gardens, the aftermath of celebration is everywhere. The gardeners are already at work, their faces lined with fatigue but their movements careful and precise. There is pride in their weariness. They have given the city its miracle, even if it lasted only one night. The head gardener makes his rounds, praising those who saved the rarest beds from trampling, offering a quiet word to those whose charges did not survive the night. In a shaded corner, you notice an apprentice on his knees, coaxing a damaged tulip, upright with patient hands. His face is unreadable, disappointment, relief, hope all mixing together. He knows that beauty is fleeting, that perfection never lasts, but he can't help mourning the loss of a blossom that took years to grow. The city too wakes slowly. People emerge from their homes, blinking in the daylight, clutching fragments of memory from the night before. In the coffee houses, talk quickly returns to business, to politics, to the distant wars at the edges of the empire. But between the complaints and gossip, you hear something softer. Praise for a certain bed of yellow tulips, a story about a stranger's kindness, a line of poetry whispered in the dark. For a while, the boundaries that usually divide the city are softer. Shopkeepers nod more readily to their neighbors. Officials seem less hurried, more willing to overlook a missing permit or an unpaid tax. Even the Sultan, or so the rumors go, is in a generous mood, pardoning a minor thief, granting a pension to a gardener whose tulip won the admiration of the court. But reality returns quickly. By noon, the festival's decorations are coming down. The guildmasters meet to argue over who contributed the most to the event and whose privileges should be increased or cut back. The poorest neighborhoods, still littered with wilted petals and empty cups, settle back into their routines of work and worry. For some, the festival is a sweet memory to cherish, a brief escape from hardship, a glimpse of beauty that makes the daily grind a little more bearable. For others, it is a source of bitterness, They grumble about the cost, about the taxes that will surely rise, about the Sultan's obsession with flowers when bread is scarce and borders are restless. In the palace, the festival's success is measured in careful notes. Advisors tally costs, assess the crowd's mood, and draft reports on what went right and what could be improved. There is talk of next year, of grander plans and new varieties, but beneath the optimism is an undercurrent of worry. The empire is changing. Peace is never guaranteed, and there are voices, quiet for now, that question whether such extravagance is wise in uncertain times. Yet the memory of Ottoman nights lingers. In the weeks that follow, you notice subtle changes. Young lovers meet in gardens where they first spoke under lantern light. Poets write new verses inspired by a single bloom glimpsed in the darkness. Children save petals as keepsakes, tucking them into books or beneath pillows, hoping to preserve a bit of magic until spring returns. Among the gardeners, the festival is both ending and beginning. They collect the bulbs, nurse the injured plants, and take careful notes in worn ledgers. For them, each festival is a lesson: what survived, what failed, what might dazzle the city next year. Their work is invisible again, but they know that for one night their skill shaped the soul of an empire. You realize as you leave the city's gardens behind that the true power of the festival is not in its spectacle, but in its echo. It reminds a weary city that beauty is worth chasing, even for a single impossible night. It offers proof that music, color, and kindness can unite a city as deeply as faith or law. And it leaves behind a quiet hope that even when the lanterns are dimmed and the petals swept away, something of the night remains, alive in memory, growing quietly beneath the surface, waiting to bloom again. You pause one last time, looking out over Istanbul as the sun climbs higher. Is it the festival that changes the city, or the city that gives the festival its power? When night falls again and the gardens bloom once more, will anyone remember the dreams they shared beneath the lantern light? Or is the magic of Ottoman nights fated always to vanish at sunrise, real only in the moment and then gone forever? Dawn breaks in Istanbul, streaking the city's rooftops with pale gold. The call to prayer drifts over the Bosphorus and the city's rhythms: bakers kneading dough, porters unloading carts, street vendors shouting their first sales. Begin again. But in a quiet courtyard far from Topkapi's marble columns, something is blooming that has nothing to do with sultans, viziers, or the empire's long reach. Here, in the tiny garden of a modest weaver, a single tulip pushes up through the earth, a drop of red brighter than any thread on his loom. It would have been unthinkable a generation ago. Once, tulips were the guarded treasures of the elite, kept behind palace walls or sold for fortunes at the bazaar. The Sultan's obsession with the flower had seemed for a time to belong to another world, a world of silken caftans, poetry, intrigue, and delicate glass vases set on tables of gold. But the empire is changing. The borders between high and low, rich and poor, are never fixed for long. And sometimes beauty finds its own way. For most of the city's people, life is a constant balancing act. Taxes are high, food is dear, and the threat of conscription or sudden disaster is never far. Most households own little more than the clothes on their backs and whatever goods they can barter for a week's wages. Yet, as the tulip era blossoms, the flower's strange magic begins to slip through the cracks of class and custom. It starts, as so many things do, with imitation. Wealthy merchants, eager to emulate the Sultan's court, invest in their own gardens. They hire skilled gardeners away from the palace, men with secrets, recipes, and a nose for profit. In the merchant quarters, once barren courtyards are transformed by careful hands. Clay pots crowd window ledges. New beds are dug along garden walls, and fountains borrowed from palace designs begin to burble in the sun. A merchant's wife arranges her first tulip display for a neighborhood feast, and guests marvel at the color, asking half in jest if the Sultan himself might send a gift of bulbs as a sign of favor. Soon, the city's guilds get involved. Bakers, cobblers, weavers. Each trade has its own rituals and holidays, and each seeks ways to outshine the others. For the Guild of Potters, the challenge is clear. Craft tulip vases finer than anything found at court. For the weavers, it is patterns, incorporating tulip motifs into rugs, shawls, and sashes, letting ordinary people wear the Sultan's favorite bloom on their backs. Competition sparks creativity. A rug from a tiny workshop might end up on a palace floor, while a merchant's garden might inspire a new design for the imperial court. But it isn't just the rich or the ambitious who join the tulip wave. The flower is contagious. In neighborhoods, where water is scarce and soil poor, children dig up patches beside the street, coaxing color from the dirt with a stubborn pride. A market vendor, saving coins for months, finally buys a single bulb, less for profit than for the hope of something beautiful at his door. At weddings, tulip petals find their way into garlands and baskets. At funerals, a single bloom marks the grave of a loved one lost. The language of the palace becomes the language of the street, reshaped by ordinary hopes and griefs. News of new varieties, the pasha's gold, the nightingale's blush, the apprentice's luck, spreads quickly. Recipes for better soil, tricks for forcing bulbs in winter, rumors of magic powders that guarantee brighter color, all circulate in the back alleys and among the kitchen maids. Some of these stories are nonsense, others work more often than not. In every case, the tulip is no longer just a symbol of power. It is a symbol of possibility, of skill, luck, or just the hope of one day catching the Sultan's eye, if only for a moment. Of course, there are those who resent the change. Palace gardeners grumble about inferior blooms outside their walls. Guild masters fight over rights to new motifs. Some worry that too many flowers will make the rare ones less precious, or that the common touch will cheapen what was once reserved for the few. But the current cannot be stopped. The more tulips appear in the city, the more everyone wants to join the game. Outside Istanbul, the tulip's journey continues. Couriers and caravan drivers carry bulbs and cuttings to distant towns. Soldiers, returning from the city, bring home stories and sometimes contraband bulbs tucked into their saddlebags. In Anatolian villages, women plant tulips alongside cabbages and beans, smiling at the color that surprises them each spring. Some bulbs thrive, others don't. But the hope is always there, and so is the pride. In the countryside, the tulip becomes a different kind of symbol. For peasants, it is not about luxury or even beauty so much as luck. A field that blooms is seen as blessed. A family that produces a rare color might earn enough from the sale to buy a new plow, patch a roof, or hold a proper wedding. Village festivals begin to borrow from the city's tulip nights. Torches are lit, children dance, and stories are told under the stars about sultans and gardeners, princes and peasants, all united for a moment by a flower. Yet life is never easy. Not every attempt succeeds. Thieves target the gardens of those who have saved for years to buy a bulb. Disputes over the origin of a prized variety cause fights between neighbors. Sometimes the tulip craze brings heartbreak, a failed crop, a bulb that never blooms, a rumor that ruins a reputation. And yet, the movement cannot be stopped. Each year, more gardens appear, more blooms brighten the city and the countryside. The tulip has slipped free of the palace, rooting itself in every layer of Ottoman life. The city's tapestry is richer, its stories more varied because of a flower that once belonged only to kings. As the morning unfolds, and you walk from the great mosques to the humblest lanes, you can't help but wonder, when beauty is no longer the property of the powerful, what changes? Can a single flower bridge the gap between palace and street, rich and poor, city and countryside? Or will the world find a way to turn even this small miracle into just another division, another contest, another loss? The city never truly sleeps, but after the initial frenzy of the tulip era, there's a new, gentler energy woven through the daily routine. The palace gardens remain at the center of fashion, but tulips now pop up in unexpected places. At street corners, in the window boxes of coffee houses, and in the courtyards of public baths, Istanbul has become, in a quiet, persistent way, a city of gardens, and for the first time those gardens belong to everyone. In the merchant quarters, the craze continues to build. Flower shows spring up in the central squares, bringing together growers from across the city and beyond. A new class of urban gardener emerges, not aristocrats or palace workers, but bakers, barbers, cobblers, and porters. These men and women barter bulbs and cuttings like other people trade recipes or secrets. One baker, famous for his honey cakes, boasts that his tulip beds are sweeter than anything he sells. A cobbler, once scorned by his neighbors, becomes a local celebrity after a streaked white and red bloom appears in his yard, quickly nicknamed the cobbler's pride. Neighbors visit, asking for seeds or advice, turning private gardens into public affairs. Tulip motifs begin to saturate city life. The designs first introduced in palace weavings and ceramics now show up on every imaginable surface. Headscarves for the market are printed with bright tulip shapes. The Potter's Guild launches a new line of coffee cups decorated with red and yellow blossoms. Even the brass lamps in the mosque, polished each Friday, take on a floral twist. People who have never seen the inside of the Sultan's garden find ways to bring tulip beauty into their daily world. Children play at gardening, copying the rituals of adults. On a street in the Armenian Quarter, two boys race to see whose seedling will sprout first, while their mothers cheer them on with wagers of bread or sweets. In a Greek neighborhood, a group of girls takes over a neglected alley, filling it with pots scavenged from broken jars and cracked bowls. Their tulips are patchy, uneven, sometimes chewed by goats or trodden by careless feet. But to them, each blossom is a miracle. Miracle. The shift is not just about flowers. It is about pride and identity. For years, the Sultan's festivals had given the common people only a glimpse of grandeur. Now, for the first time, they claim a piece of it for themselves. Households boast of their gardening skills the way others boast of a new copper pan or a clever child. The neighborhood with the brightest blooms earns respect, and sometimes gentle envy, from those around it. Tulips also become tokens in daily life. A suitor delivers a pot of rare bulbs to his beloved's doorstep, hoping she'll accept more than just his flowers. A craftsman, too poor for gold or jewels, weaves a tulip brooch from copper wire as a wedding gift. Even quarrels take on a new language. One neighbor, slighted by another, leaves a wilted bloom by the offender's door, a silent rebuke more elegant than harsh words. Yet with every new success, competition grows sharper. The cost of bulbs fluctuates wildly. New varieties become overnight sensations, only to be discarded the next season for an even rarer color or shape. There are winners, ordinary people who stumble onto a remarkable crossbreed and make enough to buy a shop or pay off their debts. But there are also losers, those who risk their savings on bulbs that fail to flower, or who are ruined by a bad harvest, a late frost, or simple bad luck. Still, the movement spreads beyond Istanbul's walls. Caravans carry the fever across Anatolia and down into the Balkans. Bulbs smuggled out of the city end up in village fields and mountain gardens. Tales circulate of a town in Thrace where every house sports a tulip bed, each year's champion. Bloom awarded a ribbon at the spring fair. In coastal towns, sailors return from the city bearing handfuls of bulbs, some bought, some stolen, some traded for stories or a bottle of wine. Tulip culture also seeps into rituals. Spring festivals, once the domain of local saints or ancient customs, begin to center on the flower. There are dances named for the tulip, songs composed to celebrate its fleeting beauty, superstitions about the luck a perfect bloom can bring. Even funerals change. Mourners now lay tulip petals on fresh graves, hoping the flower's bright color will guide loved ones to paradise. Yet the spreading culture is not always peaceful. Theft is rampant. Some neighbors turn suspicious, guarding their gardens with locked gates or thorny hedges. Rivalries flare. Old friends refuse to share bulbs. Accusations of sabotage fly at the city's flower shows, and more than one duel is fought over the origin of a particularly spectacular bloom. Religion adds another layer. Some imams, eager to keep the peace, bless the new gardens and preach that God's beauty is for all his people, not just for kings. Others are more cautious. They warn against vanity, against spending too much on bulbs and not enough on bread, against letting envy bloom alongside the flowers. Palace officials, at first amused, grow anxious. The price of rare bulbs soars, driven by demand from all sides. Guilds petition the government to control the trade, fearing that commoners might drive the old families out of the market. There are even rumors that spies from Europe are smuggling bulbs out of the empire, eager to start their own tulip craze in distant lands. Through it all, the common people keep planting. For them, the tulip is no longer just a symbol of luxury or fashion. It is a declaration, a refusal to be left out, a small but persistent hope that something beautiful can take root even in the hardest ground. On a clear afternoon, you sit with a group of neighbors in a tiny sunlit courtyard. A woman brings out strong coffee and honeyed cakes. Children chase pigeons through the tulip beds. An old man, toothless but sharp-eyed, tells stories about the first bulb he ever planted. How it brought him luck in love and fortune in business. Laughter and sunlight fill the air, and for a few minutes the troubles of the empire seem far away. As the sun sets and the city glows with the last light, you wonder, when beauty becomes a birthright instead of a privilege, what happens to envy, ambition, and pride? Do tulips unite the city, or do they give birth to new divisions? And if the palace lost its monopoly on splendor, would anyone truly miss it? Or would the world simply keep blooming, wild and unstoppable, in every crack and corner? As spring turns to summer, the city's gardens explode in a final riot of color before the sun grows fierce and the petals begin to fade. Istanbul is awash with tulips, gold and crimson, violet and white, each one a testament to the city's hunger for beauty, each one a thread tying palace and alley, merchant and beggar, city and village. The air hums with a sense of accomplishment, a collective pride. Something has shifted, and for once the change feels like a victory not for the powerful but for everyone. In the heart of the city, the grandest gardens still belong to the wealthy. The merchant class, flush with profits from trade and ambition, compete to outdo one another in displays of rarest blooms. Every courtyard becomes a miniature stage. Neighbors are invited in for coffee and to admire the new crossbreeds, and gossip swirls about who spent too much, who has the best soil, who managed to obtain a rumored palace bulb smuggled out from the Sultan's own beds. But now, those once inaccessible bulbs grow everywhere. What began as forbidden treasure, hidden in the shadows of palace intrigue, is now tucked into pots on windowsills, planted between rows of onions in peasant gardens, and clustered along mosque courtyards and city fountains. The flower shows that began in merchant squares have spread. On Sundays, entire neighborhoods hold competitions, awarding ribbons and hand-painted tiles to the brightest or most unusual tulip. Even the city's poorest claim their share. Along the waterfront, fishermen tend rough beds near their shacks, telling each other stories about luck and weather as they pull weeds and chase away goats. In the Armenian quarter, a widow becomes famous for the blue-striped tulips that spill from her cracked pots. Neighbors claim she talks to her bulbs at night, coaxing secrets from them that the palace itself has forgotten. The language of flowers continues to evolve. A single tulip, presented by a child to his teacher, now means gratitude. A string of white blooms left at a friend's door signals forgiveness after a quarrel. Women pin petals to their shawls at weddings. Boys tuck flowers behind their ears before setting off on apprenticeships. The rituals are as varied as the city's people, and all are woven together by the simple, persistent fact that tulips belong to everyone. As the city blooms, so too does its spirit of connection. The festivals once reserved for sultans and courtiers are now citywide celebrations. Lanterns are strung along every lane. Music drifts from the windows of rich and poor alike. There are even moments, small but meaningful, when old divisions begin to blur. A merchant's daughter and a baker's son fall in love over a shared admiration for a rare yellow tulip. Guilds that once fought over patterns now collaborate on public displays, turning competition into camaraderie. Beyond the city, tulip culture has become a kind of folk wisdom. Farmers time their planting not just by the moon, but by the bloom. Folktales are full of clever gardeners who outwit greedy landlords, or of humble families whose luck changes with the arrival of a new variety. The flower is no longer just a symbol of status, it is a symbol of resilience, hope, and community. Yet beneath the celebration, some shadows remain. Not everyone welcomes the change. Palace officials, resentful of losing their exclusive claim to the flower, try to impose new taxes and regulations, but enforcement is uneven and often ignored. Merchants who grew rich in the first days of the craze watch nervously as prices fall and competition rises. Sometimes a rare theft or a quarrel over bulbs reminds the city that envy and ambition will always find a way to survive, even among flowers. But even these conflicts cannot erase the deeper shift. The tulip's journey, from palace treasure to people's prize, marks a quiet revolution. It is not won by arms or decrees, but by 1,000 small acts: a child digging in a patch of poor soil, a grandmother teaching her granddaughter how to water at dawn, a laborer sharing his bulbs with a neighbor in need. By midsummer, the last of the festival petals are swept away. The gardens rest, the city breathes, and the empire's pulse slows for a while. But everywhere you look, the signs remain. A pot of green shoots on a windowsill, a splash of color beside a dusty road, the memory of a single night when the city belonged to everyone. You walk through a quiet lane as evening falls, lanterns flickering in the warm breeze. Voices echo, laughter rises, the day's troubles set aside for a moment. You realize that the real legacy of the tulip is not beauty alone, but belonging. A sense that greatness can grow in unexpected places, and that the empire's heart beats, not just in palaces, but in every home, every garden, every life. And you wonder as you pass through the city's patchwork of color, if a single flower could bridge centuries of division, what else might be possible? When the next storm comes, will the spirit of the city hold, or will the petals scatter, leaving only stories and dreams behind? Dawn seeps into Istanbul's ancient barracks, not with the bugle of war, but with the quiet shuffle of boots over stone and the unexpected scent of earth and blossoms. You're among the Janissaries, the empire's elite soldiers, famed and feared from Vienna to Cairo, their discipline the iron backbone of the Sultan's rule. But today, the clink of armor and the clatter of muskets are softened by something unusual. Tulips blooming in wooden boxes beneath the narrow windows, their colors cutting through the gray like silent banners of hope. No one would have predicted this, not even the Janissaries themselves. The barracks were built for function: thick walls, small windows, rooms designed for sleep, prayer, and endless drilling. For centuries, these men have known little of comfort. Recruited young, raised to serve the empire before family, their lives shaped by routine, loyalty, and the ever-present threat of battle. They are orphans and exiles, converts from distant lands, stripped of their old names and given new ones in the Sultan's service. Yet in this regimented world, a strange softness has taken root. It begins, as so many changes do, with a single gesture. A wounded Janissary, sent home from the front, returns to the barracks with a handful of bulbs tucked in his satchel, gifts from a grateful villager. He plants them quietly, more for something to do than any hope of beauty. A few of his comrades laugh, others grumble, but he persists, watering the earth each morning as he sharpens his blade and polishes his boots. The first shoots appear as winter loosens its grip. The barracks, usually gray and forbidding, are suddenly punctuated by thin green lines pressing up through the dirt. Some soldiers ignore them, but most cannot help but watch. When the flowers finally open, red, gold, streaked with purple, the mood shifts. Jokes become softer. The noise of morning drill is tempered by the sight of fragile color against the old stone. Before long, others join in. One man brings back bulbs from a raid in the Balkans, their shape unfamiliar but promising. Another, homesick for the hills of his childhood, spends his free time coaxing a stubborn patch to bloom. The act of gardening spreads, not as an order, but as a contagion. Wooden boxes line the windowsills. Off-duty soldiers are seen carrying watering cans instead of swords, their hands stained with earth, their talk filled with speculation about whose tulip will open next. Gardening becomes a kind of unofficial contest. There are whispered bets on whose bloom will be the first, whose will last the longest, whose will earn the attention of a passing officer. When spring comes in full, Even the commanders pause to admire the riot of color lining the parade ground. Some grumble about discipline, but most allow the flowers to stay. The barracks feel less like a fortress, more like a home. In time, the tulips become more than decoration. They become part of the Janissary's identity, a symbol of life growing alongside duty, beauty persisting even in the shadow of war. New recruits are taught not only how to march and fight, but also how to prepare a box of earth, how to choose the best bulbs, how to defend their flowers from frost, theft, and hungry pigeons. Stories grow up around the blooms. Old soldiers claim that certain colors bring luck before battle. Some insist that a flower given to a friend will protect him from harm. On the eve of campaigns, men gather in the gardens, pressing petals between the pages of prayer books, sending bulbs home to distant villages as gifts or apologies. In a life shaped by violence, the tulip is a quiet rebellion, a reminder that softness is not weakness, and that there is more to a soldier than his sword. For some, the act of tending tulips becomes a meditation, a way to cope with the memory of wounds, loss, or fear. The ritual, digging, planting, watering, waiting, offers a kind of order that no drill can match. Even those who scoff at the sentimentality soon find themselves pausing to admire a bloom at dawn, or to ask after a comrade's stubborn, unflowering bulb. Yet, not everyone approves. Some commanders see the spread of gardening as a distraction, a threat to the iron discipline that defines the Corps. Rumors circulate of new rules, orders to remove the flower boxes, to ban gardening in the name of military order. But each time the issue is raised, officers find the resistance too great. The men, hardened by war but softened by the garden, insist that the tulips stay. In private, more than one commander confides that the flowers have done more to lift spirits and build camaraderie than any punishment or parade. Outside the barracks, the city takes note. Vendors begin to appear at the gates, hawking bulbs, cuttings, and pots. The reputation of the Janissaries as gardeners spreads, some say with admiration, others with mockery. Ballads are composed about the tulip soldier. Children linger outside the walls in hopes of glimpsing the colorful windowsills. The Sultan himself hears of the change and, amused, sends a gift of rare bulbs to be shared among the ranks. It is an odd marriage. The sword and the flower, the drill masters, shout and the gardener's patience, but in this mingling something essential is revealed. The Janissaries are reminded, as are the people of Istanbul, that the heart of an empire beats not only in war rooms and palace halls, but in the quiet, persistent care that makes a broken barracks bloom. As night falls and the soldiers tend their flowers by lantern light, you can't help but wonder, can beauty truly take root in the soil of violence? Do the flowers soften the men, or do the men harden the flowers? And when war calls again, will the memory of a single blossom be enough to guide a soldier home? Spring advances, and the barracks' rough geometry, square yards and stone walls, iron gates and training yards, begins to soften beneath a thickening carpet of color. The tulips, once a novelty, now form living borders around parade grounds, shade the corners of the practice yard, and peer from every windowsill and step. The city outside may still see the Janissaries as the Sultan's fist, but within these walls the men have learned to see each other anew, no longer just brothers in arms, but comrades in the slow, stubborn art of nurturing life. What begins as pastime soon becomes ritual. The old soldier's hand, steady with musket and blade, is now just as skilled with a spade. After morning drill and evening prayers, squads gather by the garden beds, swapping seeds and advice, joking about which color signals good luck and which is a sign of heartbreak. The strictest sergeant, his voice rough from years of barking, orders quietly consults a soft-spoken Albanian recruit whose yellow tulips have become the envy of the barracks. For the first time, rank means less than expertise in the garden. The recruit from the Macedonian hills brings techniques unknown to the city-born men. The Armenian cook, once ignored except for his stews, is now respected for his cunning use of crushed eggshells and river sand. The head gardener from the Sultan's palace, called in to judge a contest, leaves with new tricks written on a scrap of paper. Here, experience comes from failure, bulbs that rot in the spring rain, colors that fade too fast, lessons learned by getting one's hands dirty. Patience, always in short supply among soldiers trained for quick action, becomes a virtue. Men, who once measured time in the beats of a drum, now learn to wait for the slow progress of green shoots through black earth. They read the weather with new urgency, curse the pigeons that peck at tender leaves, and worry over signs of blight as if their honor depended on it. In an army built on discipline and repetition, the garden teaches a different rhythm: the necessity of waiting, the inevitability of loss, and the promise of renewal. Rivalry, of course, remains. This is still a brotherhood of warriors. There are informal bets on which squad's tulip bed will be the finest, or who can coax a rare black or gold bloom to flower first. Practical jokes abound. A sergeant finds his prized bulbs replaced with onions. A recruit's flowers dyed with indigo in the night. But the pranks are mostly good-natured, a way to pass the long hours between campaigns, and disputes are settled with laughter and the sharing of cuttings. The meaning of the garden deepens with each season. For the older janissaries, the flowers evoke memories of distant childhoods, mountain meadows, village gardens, or lost family homes. For the youngest, the tulip beds are proof that belonging is possible in a world of uniforms and commands. The shared act of growing binds them more tightly than any oath. Each flower is a silent promise that even the hardest men are shaped by more than violence. Istanbul takes notice. Women selling bread at the barracks gates bring bundles of wildflowers to barter for a single prized bulb. Vendors arrive with trays of loam and compost, hawking janissary soil said to guarantee success. Children gather after school, eager to see which squad's flowers have opened, and ballads about the tulip soldiers begin to circulate in the city's coffee houses, their verses both affectionate and gently mocking. The Sultan's court, ever attentive to the mood of the army, seizes on the phenomenon. When the time comes for the annual review, palace officials invite dignitaries to tour the barracks gardens, quietly taking credit for encouraging the refinement of the corps. A minor official is dispatched to oversee the soldiers' plantings, but after several weeks he gives up. His notes are full of grudges, jokes, and rumors, and he is won over by the flower's simple beauty. Yet not everyone sees the gardens as harmless. Some commanders worry that this softness will sap the janissaries' will, make them sentimental or distractible. They issue new rules: no gardening during drill hours, no flower boxes on the firing range, all disputes to be settled without reference to whose bulbs were trampled. The men comply, but with a wink. At night, watering cans are passed hand to hand, and when officers are absent, bulbs are traded as freely as stories. It is not lost on the janissaries that the tulips offer more than comfort. They are trophies, memories, and sometimes solace for wounds that never quite heal. Veterans of recent campaigns gather by their flowers at dusk, nursing aches and old scars, sometimes silent, sometimes telling stories of comrades lost in battle. The garden becomes a place of both remembrance and hope, a living memorial that grows richer each season, each loss matched by the promise of another bloom. In the heart of this hardened brotherhood, something softer flourishes. A squad once marked by infighting and rivalry now boasts the barracks' best display, and their camaraderie is stronger than ever. A hot-headed recruit learns humility from a season of failed cuttings and stubborn soil, and in turn, teaches others what patience and persistence can yield. As the summer approaches, the flowers begin to fade, petals dropping to the earth, leaving only memory and the promise of new bulbs for next year. The soldiers gather the seeds, share them with new recruits, and tell each other that beauty, like discipline, loyalty, or courage, is something to be handed down. On a warm night, as the lamps are lit and the last drill ends, you stand with the men of the janissary barracks, listening to the gentle laughter and the quiet talk of flowers and battlefields. The garden, a patchwork of color beneath the watchful walls, is as much a testament to survival as any medal or scar. You pause, thinking, does tending a garden teach a soldier what war cannot? When the empire needs its iron fist, will the memory of tulips soften the blow? Or will the lessons of patience and brotherhood live on even when the last flower falls? Autumn descends on Istanbul, painting the city in ochre and bronze. The first chill bites at the Bosphorus, and the barracks, gardens once a riot of color, begin to wither. The tulip beds lie quiet beneath a blanket of fallen leaves, their promise tucked away in silent bulbs. The soldiers, too, change with the season. Summer's easy camaraderie is replaced by a restless energy. The empire's borders are tense. Orders come down. The Janissaries are to prepare for a new campaign. Packing for war is a ritual unto itself. Swords are sharpened, muskets checked and cleaned, uniforms mended. Yet now, in the quiet hours before departure, another ritual takes place. The men gather in the gardens one last time. Some dig up their favorite bulbs, wrapping them carefully in cloth to carry as talismans on the march. Others entrust their flowers to a friend who will stay behind, asking only that the blooms be tended and remembered. For many, it is as important as checking their powder or tightening their boots. In these moments, the garden is transformed from a place of color to a place of memory. The flowers become emblems of home, of brotherhood, of all that's left behind when the world grows hard. Jokes are told, old rivalries laid to rest. A few men even write letters home, enclosing a pressed petal as a promise of return. On the eve of departure, a soft rain falls. Lanterns flicker in the mist, illuminating faces both young and old, anxious and eager. An old sergeant, his beard gone gray, leads a short prayer by the beds. No one speaks of fear, but all feel it. The garden, usually so lively, is silent but for the patter of rain on earth and leaves. The march out of Istanbul is somber. The city's children run alongside the columns, waving. Vendors toss flowers into the ranks, red for courage, white for luck, yellow for joy. Some Janissaries tuck the blooms into their belts or helmets, letting the color ride with them into the uncertain future. For the soldiers, the tulips are more than decoration. They are armor of a different kind, a shield of memory against the cold logic of war. The campaign is long and hard. The soldiers face rivers and mountains, dust and hunger, and eventually, battle. In the moments between drills or at night around the fire, talk inevitably turns to home. Men who once spoke only of conquests now share tips on gardening, comparing, notes on soil and bulbs, reminiscing about the color of last spring's blooms. In letters sent back to Istanbul, some ask after their flowers before their families. Tell me, did my gold tulip bloom this year? Is the bed by the parade ground still standing? The worst days are tempered by small comforts. A pressed petal stashed in a pocket becomes a charm. News from the city that the barracks garden has thrived lifts spirits more than a rumor of victory. In the darkness before battle, a few men clutch their bulbs and whisper prayers not for conquest, but for survival and a return to their flowers. When the war ends, whether in victory or defeat, the Janissaries who return come back changed. Many are scarred, a few are missing, but most head straight for the garden before even greeting old friends. There, among the faded beds, they kneel in the dirt, searching for signs of life. Some find the bulbs they left in another's care have withered. Others are greeted by new blooms, proof of hope fulfilled. Tears are shed for friends who did not return, a single flower planted in their memory. Over time, the gardens grow richer, layered with stories of campaigns survived and comrades lost. New recruits learn quickly that tending to the tulips is not just tradition, but therapy, a way to work through pain and keep faith with those who came before. The act of planting becomes an act of remembrance. Each new season, a few more beds, are added, each with a story whispered among the leaves. The city outside continues to change. Political winds shift. The palace issues new decrees. But within the barracks, the legacy of the tulip persists. Even as the Janissaries' role in the empire waxes and wanes, the gardens remain a quiet sanctuary, a place where beauty outlasts even the hardest steel. Sometimes, outsiders visit, expecting to find only soldiers and discipline. Instead, they are greeted by the scent of earth, by old men humming tunes as they weed and water, by laughter and arguments over the best method to coax a stubborn bulb into bloom. The garden becomes a legend in itself. Proof that in the heart of the empire's fiercest warriors beats a softer, stubborn hope. As another spring approaches, the first shoots push through the thawing ground. The soldiers, old and new, gather to greet them, each remembering those who once knelt here, each hoping to see their own flower stand tall. The act of tending the garden, year after year, weaves the past and future together. The janissary, once defined only by his sword, is now also a guardian of color, of memory, of the fragile things that make life worth the struggle. As you leave the barracks, the sun warming your back and the scent of tulips clinging to your clothes, you reflect, can war and beauty truly coexist? Or is the garden only a brief respite in a world fated for conflict? Is the tulip just a flower, or a quiet declaration that even in the hardest lives, something bright and soft can always grow back?